Did you guys like Logan? The movie Logan.
Chuck?
Not an X-Men fan.
Yeah.
I watched it. My son said, "This is a good one. You might like it." I didn't.
Oh man, see,
I liked it.
I thought it was.
fun.
I thought it was one of the better Marvel movies that they've made.
It's James Mangold. He's a tremendously talented guy. He's the guy that did Ford versus Ferrari, which is another great film.
Sure. I didn't watch that. I need to.
Good movie.
Yeah, it's a
big time throwback. That's like a movie that should have been made in the 80s or the 90s, and he was able to get it made. It's about men, masculine men, driving really fast cars with gasoline powered engines that destroy the environment. And it's
I'm triggered.
It's also got a father-son story, which is also very,
God.
and it's got a traditional woman who's a wife.
Wait, was the father-son story the father leaving and never paying child support again? Because that's the only father-son story I've heard of anymore.
Like I said, this is a throwback. So, and it also took place in the late 60s. So
he got in his Ferrari to go buy cigarettes and never came back. No, I love that. I love what I've been doing lately on Twitch is I watch movies and we get to do these watch parties. And I love watching 80s, late 70s through the early 90s movies because they are, they're, adrenaline filled. There's actual like masculine values. It's okay to be a guy. Like it's okay to be Tom Cruise smiling gaily at Val Kilmer, but because you're flying a giant $14 million plane that goes Mach 2 and shoots down Russians. And that's awesome. And I just love that. And I hate that now all of the movies I see have forgotten that aspect of just entertaining us a little bit along with everything, because now it's like when someone, if you shoot down a Russian in a plane today, and they're doing a Top Gun sequel, called Maverick, so I'm kind of curious how they're going to handle anything like this. There would have to be like a backstory to the Russian, and we'd have to feel bad about him dying. It's like, why do we have to engage? And that's where I think Marvel on Endgame was going, was kind of getting really out there, is they're trying to make everything so impactful. And while I can appreciate what they were doing with the emotional ties on the screen, at the same time, it's like you're trying to make this comic book so important that you forgot that it's still a movie that I'm supposed to just go and watch some people throw giant hammers and lightning bolts around. That's what happened there.
Yeah. The trope I'm sick of is that when you do have a male character, a male hero, he has to have something he did in his past that he has to redeem himself for. So he's got this tragic, like post-traumatic stress disorder moment that we have to keep being reminded of, where he failed or, betrayed someone. I'm sick of it. I grew up on, John Wayne movies where John Wayne didn't have to explain himself. You just found out in the first 5 minutes of the film that John Wayne was a badass, and that's all you needed to know. And he was on the side of good, and that's all you needed to know. And then they had an actual story that he was part of, instead of this theme of redemption or what do we learn from the story? I don't want to learn anything from stories. I just want to watch them and enjoy them.
Yeah.
It's like Fistful of Dollars. What's Clint Eastwood's motivation? He's a badass. He's a son of a bitch. Well, what makes him do the right thing? And when he's asked that, he just says, there was a woman once. And that's all you needed to know. He didn't. Everyone understood what he meant.
Have you seen? Have you seen Bone Tomahawk?
Oh yeah. Chuck and I are huge S. Craig Zahler fans.
Love that guy's stuff.
Yeah.
That's what that movie reminds me of, especially what's his name, Gruder or whatever, the funniest character.
Yeah, he's great.
He's like, where he's setting up the things that, like, why should we trust you? He's like, guys, I'm smarter than all of you. Well, how do you know that? Because you're all married.
You're all married. Yeah. That's when I was like, this is my guy, and I hope to Christ that he doesn't get killed. Well, it's an S. Craig Zahler film, so nothing is off limits.
Everybody's ass is up for grabs in his movies.
Yeah, and it was but that was great. And it's the same thing. And I noticed the same thing in the Escape from New York, Escape from LA movies. Snake Plissken, like, he's got a backstory. I guess you can read about it in comics and stuff, but most of the people who were watching the movie, I don't think really went to research the history of Snake Plissken. They just have these little drop-ins here and there where in Escape from LA, it pops up where something went wrong, I think, in like Baltimore or whatever. And you figure that's it. And you never know what it was. But there was just something that went wrong. And Snake Plissken's
from New York, it was the Moscow mission. They mentioned the Moscow,
Right.
and it makes you go, I want to see that story.
Exactly.
Well, it's very similar with Jack Burton in Big Trouble in Little China. Another one of my favorite John Carpenter movies that I saw probably 4 times in the theater with my dad.
One of the best movies ever made, hands down.
You get little hints here and there about Jack's past, and then obviously he's yakking on the CB, talking about probably some stuff that's a little exaggerated, but you love that character in your bones within the first 5 minutes of that movie.
Yeah,
and
any explanation. That's what I like about it.
None.
There's no explanation of who this guy is. You find out who he is by what he does, and that's
right.
To me is the best way to characterize anybody, is by what they do, because isn't that the most important thing?
The Superman 78 Richard Donner film, he didn't redeem himself. He became Superman. I mean, he discovered his past, and through the crystal, and he accepted the task or the mission. And I really miss that about that character, and that's one thing I think Zach missed on Man of Steel is I don't need necessarily a Superman that was traumatized as a child because his super hearing hurt his ears. I just want to see Superman. I want to see an unabashed, heroic hero, and I want to see truth, justice, and the American way. Which is that line still gives me chills when I watch it from the first Superman when he's talking to Lois and she says, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And he just says he just plays it completely straight. This is the magic of Richard Donner, who's one of the best directors of the last 40 years. He just says it straight. I stand for truth, justice, and the American way. And Lois laughs. She cynically laughs. You're going to have every politician in America going after you. And he just says, I never lie. and it
nails it.
And that's it. He just nails it, dude. And you never waver. You completely believe. And that was the Richard Donner said that the mission statement for Superman the movie was the word verisimilitude, which is believability. We can't play this campy. We can't play this anything other than straight. And again, the tag of the movie was "You will believe a man can fly," and in that you also believed that that's Superman. I mean, that's the iconic character encapsulated. I don't think anybody's ever really surpassed that film. Nolan used it as a template for Batman Begins. He went back and watched Superman the movie multiple times. And I get that out of Batman Begins.
Who wrote that log line? Because it hit me a second after you said it how much better it was than I thought it was when you first said it. You will believe a man can fly. It's great. Any idea what person came up with that line? Because it's beautiful.
It's who knows. It was probably the marketing department, and Donner probably chose it. He probably had they probably gave him a list of tags, and he said that one.
Because that's fantastic, and it is a separation from kind of the comic book shows and stuff that were going on. Obviously, you had the Batman show, which was real goofy. The initial Captain America show is really goofy, kind of as well. And then to come out with a movie, and I think that's what DC has been trying to do and just failing at it, because their way to do that is to we'll make it dark and gritty. It's but that's just another form of camp, is dark and gritty.
Yeah. Well, it kind of taps in.
The secret is being earnest. You have to be earnest about it. You have to believe in it and make the readers believe in it as well. And you have to be serious, but allow humor into it as well. I mean, the basis of almost every DC character is they're kind of goofy.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to lean into that, but you have to do it in an earnest and honest way. Not satire, not cynical, not tongue in cheek, but just go at it. And the material itself. I mean, Superman's a great character, but they rarely trust that character.
Right.
You know, to on its own. He's a Boy Scout. He's a paragon. He's an ideal of what a man should be. You know, okay, just lean into that. And who wouldn't love that?
I think they're intimidated.
Most people would love it.
I think they're intimidated, and I'll tell you why I think they're intimidated by having the perfect character, right? The unstoppable Superman is when, and I'll do this through my own experience. And when I was in undergrad, I was going to be a writer, was my idea. And then I realized that wasn't going to work because I had a family in the Midwest. And it was going to be really tough for me to like move out to LA and write that wasn't going to work for me. Not that you have to do it that way, but that's just kind of how it was. But my writing professor, who I really did like, was from Mississippi, and she had this sort of method of the story arc. And I think it's because everybody read Robert McKee's story book, but it was forgive me the accent, but she said they have to try and fail, but fail valiantly, and then rise up from the ashes and succeed gloriously. And that's kind of how modern writers, I think, are being taught, is that there always has to be like this grand failure, and then they have to come up and redeem the failure, redeem themselves, and overcome in the end. And you'll notice that in modern story arcs, it's this like rising action early on, because we have to get into movies right away now. You've got to be hooking people in 10 minutes. You go back to the 70s and 80s, and you'll have 45 minutes of a slow rise. But now it's 10 minutes in, they're rising up, they're getting destroyed by their own hubris or whatever, or the demons of their past, and then they have to work through that through Act 2, and then in Act 3 they get to come back and overcome the baddie. And that's like the blueprint for every single movie we're getting, whether it's superheroes or not. And give me just a second. Okay, YouTube was glitching out for a second. I hate YouTube so much sometimes, but we're back now. But yeah, that's like the way every single story arc goes, and I think that's the way that writers are being taught as they're in these schools with professors who maybe have published one book, possibly, but their career as a writer was them being a professor of writing.
Well, this is this power of myth shit, this stuff that Joseph Campbell foisted upon anybody who wants to write. And I advise everybody who wants to be a writer to ignore that. Just tell your story the way you want to tell it. And that's why TV, movies so often are free of any kind of surprise, because they're all going from the same template. They're all going literally from the same computer program, telling them, well, you need a sex scene here.
Right.
And here's the scene where the hero refuses the mission. How many times have we seen the hero refuse? I don't want to see the hero refuse the mission. There's a scene in Rolling Thunder, which is a bloody revenge film with William Devane and Tommy Lee Jones from the 80s. And, William Devane is a POW coming back from Vietnam. His wife is murdered, and his arm is taken. His arm is shoved in a garbage disposal.
Oh, God.
Replaced with a hook. And then all he wants to do is find the guys who did it. And he goes to Tommy Lee Jones, who was in the next cell at the Hanoi Hilton from him.
Sure.
And Tommy Lee Jones has his life worked out. He's married, he's got a job and everything else. And William Devane comes to him and says, basically, I want you to go to Mexico with me and help me kill these guys. And Tommy Lee Jones listens to him tell the story and then says, when do we leave?
Yeah.
Like, yes. Yes. We don't have 15 minutes of, well, I can't go with you because I got to take care of my wife. And then 15 minutes later, he shows up at the bus terminal. I changed my mind. It's like,
now that's
what we get all the time now.
That's like the Wild Bunch, where Bill Holden walks in and he looks at all the guys and he says, "Let's go." And then Warren Oates looks at him and says, "Why not?" And then all of a sudden they do that classic walk, and
even before he says let's go, he shares a look with the other three.
Yes.
And there's an understanding without any words passing between them that, yeah, we're going to go get these bastards.
Yep.
Well, yeah, and you think about it in real life from every context that you hear is, you know, are you going to refuse to go to the grocery store? Are you going to like fail to make it to the store and then overcome? Like you're thinking, no, you're going to just go to the store and get your stuff and go home. That's the story. There isn't always this 3-prong arc. And then you could take it from that silly mundane example all the way up to the guy, since it's 9/11, I guess we should talk about the guys on United 93, right? They're sitting there and the guy gets I need to know, did they crash a plane into the building? And they find out that yes, that happened. And then wasn't it just like, let's go was like the last thing?
They got a plan. They basically huddled together, Todd Beamer and a bunch of other guys. And they said, okay, they got box cutters, they've got this, they got that. They wrapped their arms with the padding from the seats, and they got the drink tray. They used that as a battering ram to try and get into the cockpit. I mean, you know, when you talk to military guys and spec ops guys, you know, and Chuck's good friends with some of them, I'm good friends with some of them. You know, when they're going out on an op, there's none of this introspection. There is the planning. And there is the anticipation that the plan is basically going to go haywire once, you know, which all plans do with first contact of the enemy. But these guys just execute.
Yeah.
They just execute, you know, and I miss that in my heroes. You know, you see it more in Westerns really than anything else, where, you know, the man from nowhere comes into town to solve a problem, and there's really no justification. It's just there's some wrongdoing going on. And the hero comes in and vanquishes it and then leaves because he's no longer needed after that.
Well, the beauty of the Western is it's a story in which you build up conflict and resolve it through violence at the very end. And every Western is the same, but every Western is different because there are nuances. How do you get there? You know, is the guy on the right side of the equation? There's all kinds of ways to play a Western. And, you know, you can't mess with that formula, you know, to any degree, or it's just a historical drama. You know, it's not a Western anymore. But you know, yeah, you want to see the heroes set in motion. And the thing is, this is all lazy writing because you want to create conflicts for the characters that are realistic and rising. And that's what I miss in a lot of this stuff. There's no rising level of threat. You know, you watch a Hitchcock film and shit just gets worse and worse and worse until it's resolved. And I don't see that. I see so many movies where like the best action scene is at the beginning. Yeah. And then the rest is all, well, when are they going to do that better? No.
Yeah, the villains these days just suck. And the villain and the hero are dependent on one another. They're almost mirrors, you know. But one doesn't want to allow what's happening to them to happen to the rest of the world, and the other one wants to inflict his pain on everybody. But I think that, you know, unless you have a really good villain, it's hard for the hero, you know, to, I think, be effective in a lot of ways. You know, John Milius talks about this too. He talks about how Hollywood is full of broken writers. And he even said that 3-act thing. He said, that's a bunch of bullshit. He said, he said, just dismiss that altogether. He said, I have never sat down. You know, and this is a guy that wrote Apocalypse Now, Red Dawn, Conan the Barbarian, The Wind and the Lion, you know, some of the most iconic films that I grew up with. I think he's the greatest writer in movies. I often call Chuck the John Milius of comics because he is. But honestly, man, I mean, this guy,
no, I'm just kidding.
This guy just said all this stuff about, you know, 3-part acts and the hero has to overcome. It's all a bunch of happy horse shit. I just sit down with a legal pad and he writes all of his scripts out longhand. It's like Chuck was saying, tell your story, and don't worry about the rest. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I took the McKee course because DC Comics insisted that all of its writers take it, and they paid for it. They paid for the hotel. They paid for me to take the course. And when I got back to DC afterwards, Denny O'Neil, the Batman editor, he said, "So what'd you get out of it?" I said, "Well, there was some good stuff and some stuff I can use." And he articulated a lot of things I've never really put into words. I said, but the 3-act thing, I don't get it, and I don't think I ever will. And then he said, "Don't worry about it. You do it naturally."
You know what the best thing I think from the McKee course actually was that movie adaptation.
I was just gonna say that.
So
Brian
good.
Cox is that's the only reason to really bring up Bob McKee, frankly, and just watch that scene.
How perfect was he as Bob McKee? I mean, he just recreated that experience of abuse.
Yeah,
you know, it's funny. Milius said, I don't know if Milius was taught by McKee at USC or someone similar, but he talks about a guy at USC when he was there with Lucas and De Palma, all those guys. They called them the USC Mafia. All those directors that came and cinematographers that came out of USC in the 70s and then went on to make all those great films of the late 70s and 80s. But he said there was a guy there who would really light into you. Or he would either light into you or he would make fun of you. And if you're sitting there reading something to him and he got bored, he would say, "You know what? I'm going to make a phone call and go play tennis." And then he'd get up and leave.
That reminds me of a guy I met. His name was Sidney Iwanta, and he was a guy who would approve the scripts of all family programming in the mid 80s. So Transformers, My Little Ponies, the old ones and stuff like that. And he did that for a bunch of the networks as a consultant. He came and talked to our class, and we had to write, in my screenwriting class, we had to write an actual screenplay, and then he would read them. And it was on everybody's, it was stopped on page 10. This is trash. You are great.